Sent to prison for 10 years, the lorry driver who killed a woman and 3 children while he was on his mobile phone. The judge said he may as well have had his eyes closed.
We pulled up behind some lorries, just crawling along. Everyone slowed all down, and then that was it. Bang.
Caught on camera the moment Tomasz Kroka looked up, too late to avoid a tragedy. The mother and 3 children killed in what the judge described as a terrible and devastating loss.
In our eyes, the sentence does not do justice to the crime committed. Tracy.
We'll have the latest from Reading Crown Court, including the horrific images the family wants you to see. Also this lunchtime, ignoring a looming crisis, MPs tell the Chancellor he's wrong to give the false impression that the NHS is awash with cash. At the gates, pro-government forces in Iraq enter the outskirts of the city of Mosul. New proposals for assessing whether disabled people can go to work. Charities say they may be unfair. 80 years ago, the voice and the face that launched television as the BBC went to air for the first time.
In the south, conman caught in the act, a warning from a victim who lost her life savings to a scam. And the stigma surrounding hair loss. A mother and daughter team up to raise awareness.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. He may as well have been driving with his eyes closed. The damning words of the judge as she sentenced Tomasz Kroka for driving his lorry into the back of queuing traffic, killing a woman and 3 children whilst he was on his mobile phone. Harrowing video from his lorry cab was shown to the jury, revealing the moment he looked up from his phone to realise too late what he'd done. His lorry smashed into the Vauxhall Corsa, which was carrying Tracy Houghton, her sons Josh and Ethan, and stepdaughter Amy Goldsmith. They all died at the scene. The family said the 10-year sentence was insufficient for a crime which they said had destroyed their family. Duncan Kennedy is in Reading for us. Duncan.
Well, Simon, the family themselves have described this as a complete nightmare. There were various impact statements read out in court, others released on video. They said that their lives have been utterly devastated by this. It all came last August on the A34 north of the M4 in Berkshire. The family had been travelling in 2 cars at the end of a camping holiday. They'd stopped because of stationary traffic. A series of other lorries were surrounding them. But Tomasz Kroka, who was a kilometre back down the road, did not stop because he was on his mobile phone. Harrowing footage was shown in court, caught by cameras inside his lorry cab, of him looking down at his phone, scrolling through his music. This was about a kilometre back from this stationary traffic where the family were waiting. Kroka is looking at his phone for at least 7 seconds and possibly as much as 45 seconds. And it wasn't until less than 1 second before impact that he looks up, by which time, of course, it is too late. There was a series of shunts. The car containing Tracy Houghton and her 3 children, Amy, Josh and Ethan, was crushed under another lorry. They were killed instantly. Today, Kate, the mother of Amy, gave this reaction outside court.
Today, Tomasz Kroka has been sentenced for killing much-loved members of our family. However, in our eyes, the sentence does not do justice to the crime committed. Tracy Houghton, her 2 sons, Ethan and Josh, and Amy Goldsmith, were innocent victims of his actions. On the 10th of August 2016, Mr. Kroka made the decision to change his music on his phone whilst driving a lorry at 50 miles per hour. His lorry hit a queue of stationary traffic, killing our 4 family members and seriously injuring another driver. In the moments Mr. Croker chose to look at his phone, he caused a multiple vehicle accident that endangered all surrounding road users and took the lives of Tracy, Ethan, Josh and my daughter Amy.
Well, as I say, the moment of impact was caught on CCTV footage from inside Tomasz Kroker's lorry. It was played in court. At that point, several members of the family left. Those few seconds were then shown to the rest of the court, and there are two cameras, one pointing out in front and one showing Croker himself. The music you can hear on this is the music Croker was adjusting on his mobile phone. That's why he was looking down, and that's why he didn't see all that traffic fast approaching him, and why there was this horrendous impact. Let's take a look now at the background to this case and how we got to the point that the judge said was the most horrific case she had ever seen. 4 lives lost in a fraction of 1 second. Tracy Horton, her sons Ethan and Josh, and her stepdaughter Amy. Today at Reading Crown Court, Tracy's partner Mark and other family members came to hear how they died after being hit by a lorry driver using his mobile phone. That driver was 30-year-old Tomasz Kroker, who'd been on his phone for up to 45 seconds before impact. Cameras in his lorry show him scrolling on his phone to change the music he was listening to. He only looks up less than 1 second before he hits a line of stationary traffic in front of him. The car Tracy and her children were in is barely visible under the back of the lorry on the right. The judge said Kroker might as well have been driving with his eyes closed. Amy's natural mother, Kate, today spoke outside court.
Our children lost their lives because of the reckless actions of Thomas Croker. But we are not the only family to have suffered due to what is perceived by many as minor, inconsequential crime. A crime that takes place on our roads every day. We urge you to make a personal commitment to stop using mobile phones whilst driving and make our roads safer for everyone.
The crash happened on the A34 in Berkshire last August. The family had been returning from a camping holiday. The judge said she wholeheartedly endorsed the family's hope that this case will lead to greater public awareness of the use of mobile phones whilst driving.
The families of those involved, everyone present here today, whilst I reinforce how dangerous it is to drive whilst using a mobile phone, and ask that we all have a collective responsibility not to do so when driving. It simply isn't worth the risk.
Croker was today jailed for a total of 10 years after admitting dangerous driving, in an incident the families are saying was wholly avoidable and has left them utterly devastated. Well, the law on using mobile phones, as the judge made clear today, is very clear. It's illegal if you're driving. The penalties for using a phone whilst you're driving are being looked at, and new laws are due to be introduced next year. But what the judge seemed to be saying in her comments today was that this wasn't just a matter of the law. What this needs is a change in attitudes from drivers using those mobile phones. Simon.
Duncan Kennedy at Reading Crown Court, thank you. The government has been accused of making misleading claims about extra funding for the NHS in England. A group of MPs has written to the Chancellor saying it's wrong to say a further £10 billion is being invested over the next 5 years. The Treasury says the government has given the NHS the funding it's requested. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson reports.
It's one of the toughest periods in NHS history, with record patient numbers and deficits. The government's promised to provide an extra £10 billion for it by 2020, but MPs on the Health Select Committee have said that figure is misleading.
If you look at the way that that figure is reached, it's by adding another year to the spending review, and also by changing pots of money from one part of the health budget to another. And so it can give an impression that more is given, when in fact the real figure is very considerably lower.
The MPs insist instead of an extra £10 billion, the NHS is in fact getting £4.5 billion, less than half of the original pledge. That's because of billions of pounds of cuts to local government health budgets. and leading health researchers also think the figure is incorrect.
The government has said it's given 10 billion to the NHS. That's just not a figure that those of us who work with these numbers recognise. We think it's closer to 4.5 billion, and that's going to cause the NHS some really significant problems over the next few years.
The Treasury has responded to the criticism, saying the government has backed the NHS's own plan for the future with a 10 billion real terms increase in its annual funding by 2020 to 2021, helping to ease the pressures on hospitals, GPs and mental health services. It is wrong to suggest otherwise. But cuts or closures to A&E services are already being planned by some NHS commissioners, and a majority who responded to a survey by the Health Service Journal confirmed they were going to close or downgrade community hospitals. And the body representing hospital and community services says more cuts are inevitable.
I think there's no doubt that if there isn't more funding, then we need to make some very important decisions about, do we have a smaller workforce? Do we have less hospitals? Do we have a poorer quality of service? What we can't carry on trying to do in the NHS is deliver the impossible.
The MP's concerns about the NHS's budget come ahead of the Chancellor's autumn spending statement and ahead of what is expected to be one of the most difficult winters in the service's history. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Let's speak to our health editor, Hugh Pym. And at the heart of this warning is this looming crisis, as they call it.
Yes, Simon, those are the words that are being used. It's worth noting that at this time of year, Halloween, then fireworks night, early November, you're going to get more demands for money from the government ahead of the autumn statement by the Chancellor, which tends to come at the end of November. But I think this one is rather different. There's a much wider debate going on now about how much money the NHS needs and how much it's been given. Now, the government is adamant that it's given 10 billion over a certain period of time, up to 2020, which is what the NHS actually asked for, and there were no complaints when that money was allocated in 2014, then in the spending review by George Osborne last year. But what the Health Select Committee is saying, the significance being it's chaired by a Conservative MP, it's a cross-party committee, what they're saying is that money was going to NHS England. If you look at the broader health spending envelope, which includes prevention and that sort of thing, then actually it's rather less. So I think this is a very significant debate ahead of what will probably be a pretty difficult autumn statement for Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, given the uncertain economic outlook.
Hugh, thank you very much, Hugh Pym. The Democratic leader in the US Senate says the head of the FBI may have broken the law by revealing that the Bureau was investigating emails possibly linked to Hillary Clinton. Harry Reid accused FBI Director James Comey of violating an act which bars officials from influencing an election. News of the FBI inquiry comes with just over a week to go before the US election. Well, Jane O'Brien is in Washington, and for Team Clinton, the best form of defence, it would seem, is attack.
Well, indeed, and Harry Reid has made that very clear with this letter accusing the Director of the FBI, James Comey, of intending to influence the political process and the election. Now, that's a fairly high bar to prove criminality, and certainly other people have come forward, including the former Attorney General Eric Holder, to say that he doesn't think that Mr. Comey acted with intent and that basically he is an honourable man, but he made a mistake. But whichever way you look at it, it's very clear that the director of the FBI and the FBI itself is now firmly inserted into this extraordinary political campaign. And the latest on the investigation is that the FBI is now looking at these emails to find out whether or not any of them contain classified information or whether indeed there are any that they haven't seen before.
Jane, thank you. Jane O'Brien there. Special forces fighting Islamic State militants in Iraq have intensified their advance on Mosul and are now, according to reports, thought to be close to entering the city. Frank Gardner reports.
2 weeks on since their offensive began, Iraqi forces and their allies have reached the edge of Mosul. 30,000 troops and militias, backed by US and British air power, have been slowly retaking the outlying villages from IS, ahead of the battle for the city itself.
We liberated Shura yesterday. The battle lasted until 4 p.m. and we killed more than 35 terrorists. They showed very little resistance. They were quickly defeated by the federal police and our artillery.
Refugees have been streaming out. Here they're being told to show their faces and lift up their veils in case of concealed explosives. Over 1 million people are thought to be trapped in Mosul, prompting talk of a potential humanitarian crisis. And as IS fighters face overwhelming odds, they have sometimes resorted to using civilians as human shields.
We are liberated, thank God. They treated us very badly. It felt like we were dying. We saw hell. We were very tired. But now we are free and we came here.
A second front has been opened to the west, around the town of Tal Afar. Iraqi Shia militias are aiming to cut the link between IS's two main centres of Raqqa and Mosul.
There's been intelligence confirming a flow of Islamic State fighters from Raqqa and Syrian territories towards Mosul. This is contrary to what was expected, that there would be an escape or withdrawal from Mosul to Raqqa.
With all these Iraqi forces mobilised, the eventual recapture of Mosul is not really in doubt. But stabilising the city and the wider area will remain a massive challenge. And as IS gives up territory, it'll do its utmost to make life there intolerable. This war is far from over. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
Changes to the way disabled people are assessed for out-of-work benefits have been outlined by the government. The measures set out in a consultation document include a review of statutory sick pay and GP fit notes to encourage people to make a swifter return to work. Our disability correspondent Nikki Fox reports.
Bridging the disability employment gap is something successive governments have struggled to do since 2010. Work programmes designed to find employment for those with disabilities have had little success. 24-year-old Jack has a philosophy degree. He was on the government's work programme for 2 years.
Unfortunately, I didn't find any work directly through them.
He believes that whilst the proposals are a step in the right direction, the situation is more complex than ministers understand.
People need more training, I think, to understand what different disabilities actually mean. It all gets lumped into one umbrella, and then they try and get a one-size-fits-all solution to it, and it's more about possibly finding a job rather than finding a career.
The new consultation is reviewing everything from statutory sick pay to the controversial work capability assessments. It's hoped the proposals will not only ensure more people find jobs, but that those on long-term sick are better supported back into work. Campaigners have cautiously welcomed the review. They say the system has needed a complete overhaul for a long time, but also stress that more needs to be done to encourage businesses to take on disabled people.
People need to feel there's really going to be help there to get you a job. And to do that, it needs a big change of culture. And it also means that employers need to have requirements on them. All the requirements so far have really been on the individuals.
I put this to the minister leading on the changes.
Actually, this is going to help their business. There are people out there who would make great workers who are not now getting the chance to work.
With the greatest respect, Damien, I've heard that quite a lot, that obviously it makes business sense to employ people with disabilities. They've got a lot to offer. But is that enough of a reason for employers to take on disabled people?
We probably haven't done enough yet to make employers realise that this is the next great step forward. I see this in the realms of 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when people were more or less introducing women into workplaces they'd never been to before. This is as big a change as that.
Nobody is denying that the current system needs changing if the disability employment gap is to be halved anytime soon. Campaigners are pleased that government has recognised that there are many who need tailored support to get a job, but they also want assurances that those who can't work will be protected. Nikki Fox, BBC News.
It's coming up to 1:20, our top story this lunchtime. Sent to prison for 10 years, the lorry driver who killed a woman and 3 children while he was on his mobile phone. The judge said he may as well have had his eyes closed.
In our eyes, the sentence does not do justice to the crime committed. Tracy Houghton, her 2 sons Ethan and Josh, and Amy Goldsmith were innocent victims of his actions.
And in South today, con men caught in the act, a warning from a woman who lost her entire life savings after falling victim to a scam. And the mother and daughter teaming up to lift the lid on the stigma surrounding hair loss.
The Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi is chairing a cabinet meeting today to discuss emergency funding to rebuild central areas of the country following the latest earthquake. Officials are urging people to move away from the area because of the high risk of aftershocks. The historic town of Norcia was one of the worst affected by the quake on Sunday, from where Jenny Hill reports.
In the tranquility of the Umbrian countryside, lives in ruin. It's hard to believe no one was killed here. The earthquake, Italy's strongest in nearly 40 years. Thousands of people are now homeless. In Norcia, this camp, set up to house them after earthquakes last week, is closed. They've all been told to leave the area. More shocks are predicted.
We spent the last 24 hours here. We slept the night in the car. There's nothing left working in Norcia. No shops, no facilities. Whatever you need isn't there. No toothbrush, no food.
No one except emergency workers can go into the old walled town. Norcia's ancient buildings, now rubble. As structural engineers assess the damage, the Italian government reckons the cost. The Prime Minister's promised the region hundreds of millions of euros. For now, the focus is on rebuilding communities. But there's a big, as yet unanswered question here. How do you protect towns and villages like this, which lie in an area notoriously vulnerable to seismic activity? For this woman, history repeats itself. Vanda's father helped to reconstruct the town after an earthquake nearly 50 years ago. Today, she says, we find ourselves reliving that catastrophe. My father says it's worse than it was back then. It's been a shock for us, for all the people who live and work here. Norcia's medieval walls were built into the shape of a heart. Broken now, one woman here told us, but strong enough to survive. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Norcia.
Officials in Glasgow are expected to approve a controversial plan to set up the UK's first so-called fix rooms, where drug addicts can inject heroin and also smoke the drug under supervision. The scheme aims to address the problems caused by an estimated 500 users who inject on Glasgow's streets. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon reports.
Glasgow is not unique in its problem with drugs, but it is looking at a unique way in the UK to try to deal with it. The paraphernalia of addiction is often just discarded after use. It can mean those living in parts of the city where users shoot up have to run the risk of dirty needles and syringes in the streets.
It's disgusting. Police are not doing much about it. So
Girl stays up here as well, and she went to put her baby in the pram, and there was needles in the kid's pram.
Now the authorities here are looking into providing supervised facilities to give addicts a safe space to inject or smoke illegal drugs without fear of arrest. One former long-term drug user told the BBC so-called fix rooms would not have helped him.
My using was 24 hours and I wanted to have somewhere to use all the time. I didn't want to just have to kind of book in or wait for somewhere to open. I wanted to be able to use my drugs as soon as I got them.
Supervised injecting facilities are already in use in a number of countries, including Australia, Denmark and Germany. Those who support the measures here point to these as proof they reduce the risk of harm to the wider community and specifically cut the number of drugs-related deaths.
There has not been one fatality, and that's really important. As well as that, it has other benefits such as reduction in bloodborne viruses and getting people engaged with other services such as housing and potentially treatment programs.
But there are others who think this could send the wrong message.
Harm reduction has been the predominant approach to tackling our drug problem for the last 20 years, and it has not succeeded. And this is just another instalment of that. Calling it a pragmatic response, in a sense, is just using words to cover up what it is. It's a green light to illegal drug use.
So-called fix rooms will prove controversial. If they do get the go-ahead here, many details such as where they'd be located and how exactly they would operate have still to be worked out. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Glasgow.
Demolition work is likely to start this week on what remains of what's thought to be Britain's oldest hotel. The Royal Clarence in Exeter had stood for 300 years and survived the Blitz, but it's been virtually destroyed by the blaze. Well, John Kay is there for us. John.
Yes, Simon, this area by Exeter Cathedral would normally be full of shoppers and people on their lunch breaks right now, but at the moment it is completely dead. There's a cordon in place, and let me show you why, because using the fire brigade lift there, we can show you that is the front of the Clarence Hotel, the Royal Clarence Hotel, and just look inside. This was a building of national significance. Lord Nelson among the many people who stayed there over the centuries. The owners say they want to try to rebuild it somehow, but what a task they're going to face.
It is hard to take in. A building that was such a part of this city's history has gone.
Obviously what we don't know is when they start taking this facade down.
Yeah. The grand Georgian frontage may look intact, but it'll have to be demolished. And just look behind it. A medieval gem, said to be England's oldest hotel, now in ruins. The fire started on Friday morning, and there are still hotspots inside today.
Be under no illusions, this is a massive part of Exeter. You know, this area is the heart of Exeter, and it's really affected people in the city. You know, everybody's been coming up to me, friends, family, people in the street who know I'm in the fire service, and everyone's got a lovely story about the hotel. So it has really affected people here.
The blaze started in a neighbouring building which is home to an art gallery, and then spread quickly through the wooden roofs. These old timber buildings are so tightly packed together that even some shops on the high street were damaged.
You can see how close the fire got to getting through to this building.
It starts in here, goes on top of the roofs, which you can see.
Experts are now trying to assess what has been lost and how they can preserve what remains.
We had 20-25% loss of the city in one night in the Blitz. So for a local level, we cherish these buildings, you know, because we've got so little left. People are just shocked that something which is the backdrop to your life that you crisscross every week in Exeter suddenly is gone.
Hundreds of firefighters have been here since Friday, and some say this has been one of the most difficult incidents they've ever had to deal with. Putting out the blaze may be almost done, but the challenge here is far from over.
The first challenge is just getting those huge demolition vehicles onto the green, then the challenge of the demolition, then getting all that rubble down the narrow street out of here. Could take months. Simon.
John Kay, thank you very much. In this week, in 1936, television was born, and it looked a bit like this. On the schedule, a news bulletin from British Movietone News, followed by an entertainment medley of variety acts and dancing girls, including comedians Buck and Bubbles and the Chinese juggling act The Lai Foons. There's no surviving footage of that show, but Nick Hyam looks back at the birth of television 80 years ago.
The controllers are ready on vision and sound. The vision and sound are on. The station goes on the air.
It was pioneering, high-tech, thrilling. 80 years ago, the BBC launched television with a promotional film singing quite literally of the wonders of the new medium.
A mighty maze of mystic magic rays is all about us in the blue.
On the 2nd of November, 1936.
Now that first broadcast and some of the equipment used have been reconstructed for a television documentary.
Can put the lens in place.
At Cambridge University, Dr. Hugh Hunt rebuilt one of those early cameras.
So this is what the disc looks like, and you'll see it's got tiny
little
holes in it.
In a spiral. It was a mechanical system. A bright light focused by a lens shone into a darkened box through holes in a spinning disc. As the disc span, the light scanned the image. The reflections were picked up by photoelectric cells. I tried it out. The replica has lower resolution than the cameras used in 1936, so it necessitated some pretty heavy makeup. Right. So, there you have it. Even my own mother would be scared. Shall we see what it looks like?
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Here you go.
Okay, so I'm going to get in here.
Yeah. Turn to your left. Oh, look at that. Turn to your right. Very good.
The technology had been developed by the father of television, John Logie Baird, starting in the 1920s.
He took the technology from the 1920s through to the 1930s so fast. On his own, he did everything. He understood the mechanical side, the optical side, the electronics side. He understood the entirety of his technology. Brilliant man.
The venue for those first broadcasts was Alexandra Palace in North London, where Baird's cameras were pitched against a rival electronic system developed by Marconi EMI. To televise scenes like these in the studio, Baird used a film camera, then developed the film in seconds and scanned the film image. His equipment was cumbersome and fixed. You can see it on the left in the glass box in this still of the Baird studio. EMI's electronic cameras, by contrast, could move around the studio and even go outside. After 3 months, Baird's system was scrapped. Those early viewers were treated to dramas, dancing girls, cookery demonstrations, motoring programmes and outside broadcasts. The world was never the same again. Nick Hyam, BBC News.
Certainly wasn't. Now the weather, here is John.
And here I am, emerging from the fog, Simon. It was a very foggy start to the day across some parts of the country. But with time, that fog has been lifting, it's been dispersing, and the sun has been shining through, and temperatures have been shooting up. It is beach weather in Cornwall as I speak, 20 degrees, and the odd spot is nudging towards 21 as I speak. Quite remarkable. Enjoy it. It's not going to last for all of us over the next few days. It is going to turn chillier as we get into early November. Some sunshine, yes, but by night, some fairly widespread frost. The change coming along behind a cold front, would you believe? Behind that, the blues lie in wait. Ahead of that, the map is coloured orange, hence those high temperatures. Now, the front will bring some rain, already is, across the north of Scotland, gradually edging southwards. A lot of cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, so not so warm here, but yes, in the sunshine further south through England and Wales, widely up into the mid to high teens once the fog has cleared. Now, as we head into the evening and night, so that rain, that front, will continue to move southwards. The rain will turn very light and patchy, but a band of cloud ahead of that, though. The main story is, no doubt about it, the fog will be a real issue first thing tomorrow morning, as we'll see in a moment. Behind that, weather front, clearer skies and temperatures close to freezing, actually, in the glens of Scotland, perhaps Northern Ireland. Bright and crisp, sunny start to the day. Some showers across the north of Scotland, wintry showers up over the high ground. Brighter skies getting into the far north of England. But the southern half of the UK will be grey and damp and dismal and foggy across the southern half of England in particular, and that fog could be a real issue for some of the motorway networks and indeed some of the airports as well. So if you are setting out tomorrow morning, just allow some extra time and check out your BBC local radio station, because that fog could be quite dense. It will gradually lift through the morning, lifting into low cloud. It's going to be a grey old day across the southern half of the UK, the odd spot of drizzle as that front arrives. Northern half of the UK, by contrast, bright and crisp and sunny. That breeze will continue to bring some showers across the north of Scotland. Most other places seeing a lot of fine weather. Not helping the temperatures, though, despite the sunshine, just about 9 or 10 degrees through the afternoon, and cooler than today across the southern half of the UK. Now, as that front clears through tomorrow night and the skies clear, temperatures will fall. The map turns blue, and I reckon by first thing on Wednesday morning, many of us will be waking up to the first frost of the season. This could be the pretty scene for you on Wednesday morning. Temperatures will be slow to rise despite a lot of sunshine on Wednesday. The brisk breeze still bring perhaps the odd shower to the east coast, but most of us will be dry, albeit a lot chillier than it has been. Temperatures around 9 to 11 degrees. That's some way off. Halloween tonight, of course, and turning quite spooky, I think, as that fog redevelops. Simon.
John, thank you very much. A reminder of our main story this lunchtime. Sent to prison for 10 years, the lorry driver who killed a woman and 3 children while he was on his mobile phone. The judge said he may as well have had his eyes closed. That's all from the BBC News at 1 on BBC One. We join the news teams where you are. From me, good afternoon.